All right. Welcome to your personalized deep dive. Today we're going to be exploring those excerpts you shared from Jordan Peterson's Maps of Meaning, The Architecture of Belief.
It's a fascinating book.
Yeah. And we're going to be like tackling some really big questions, Like what drives somebody to do something truly evil?
Yeah.
And Peterson, he kind of tackles this in a really interesting way, blending personal stories and insights from psychology, mythology, and religion.
Yeah, it's interesting how he starts the book.
Yeah. How does he start it?
Well, he doesn't start it with some grand theory.
Right.
He starts with a very personal crisis of belief
Okay.
that was fueled by the Cold War and just the threat of nuclear annihilation. It was hanging over everybody's heads.
Right. Yeah.
And he even recounts a chilling story about a prisoner
Okay.
who on the surface seemed harmless,
Mm.
but was actually a double murderer.
Wow. It really makes you think, like, what happens when the world feels like it could end at any moment? And how do you reconcile the face that somebody presents to the world with the darkness they might be hiding?
Right.
That's a,
Yeah.
that's a big question to kind of grapple with.
Yeah, and this encounter, along with a really haunting painting of Christ that he found,
Okay.
really set Peterson on this journey to try to understand the human capacity for evil.
So that's where he takes a turn that I don't think a lot of people would expect, right? He dives headfirst into the world of dreams and Jungian psychology.
Yeah.
He starts finding meaning not just in clinical observations,
Right.
but in like these stories that we've been telling ourselves for centuries, myths and religious narratives.
Yeah.
So he's not saying that we should take these stories literally, right?
What?
More like they hold a key to understanding the human psyche,
Yeah.
even if they're not factual accounts of history.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay.
It's like Peterson sees the world as having these two distinct but intertwined layers.
Okay.
There's the objective world, the realm of science and facts, the place of things, as he calls it.
Okay.
But then there's the world of subjective experience,
Yeah.
values and emotions, where our actions and beliefs shape our reality. The forum for action
Okay.
and myth and narrative become the language of this second layer.
I'm picturing two maps almost.
Okay.
You have one for navigating the physical terrain, and then you have another one for navigating the terrain of the human heart.
Yeah, that's a brilliant way to put it.
So to speak.
And this is where Peterson's maps of meaning come in.
Okay.
Think of them as personalized guides
Okay.
that are shaped by your values and beliefs
Right.
that connect your current state to where you long to be.
So it's less about knowing how to do something
Right.
and more about knowing what matters to you, what direction you want to take your life.
Exactly.
Okay.
But here's where it gets interesting.
Okay.
Peterson argues that it's not just our desires that shape these maps, but also our encounters with the unknown.
Okay, so like those moments when we're confronted with something that we don't understand,
Right.
something that shakes up our beliefs. Yeah.
And forces us to adapt.
Yeah.
So the unknown is both terrifying and exhilarating.
Yes.
Like standing at the edge of a map and not knowing what lies beyond,
Right.
but feeling this pull to explore.
Yeah, that's a fantastic analogy.
Okay.
And it's this very response to the unknown that Peterson links to brain activity,
Okay.
particularly in the right hemisphere.
Good.
He argues that this part of the brain plays a crucial role in processing novelty and uncertainty, pushing us to explore and adapt.
Okay, now you've got me hooked.
Yeah.
Tell me more about this connection between the brain and the unknown.
So Peterson connects this to two fundamental ways of knowing how and knowing what.
Okay.
Knowing how is about skills.
Right.
Our ability to navigate the world effectively.
Mhm.
Knowing what is about mental models, our understanding of how the world works.
Right.
Exploring the unknown requires both.
So we need to be able to both act and understand
Yes.
to venture into uncharted territory.
Right.
But how do stories,
Yeah.
particularly ancient myths,
Fit into all of this.
stories, especially myths, provide a sort of roadmap for the unknown,
Okay.
making the unpredictable more familiar and less frightening.
Okay.
For example, the Enuma Elish, the Mesopotamian creation myth,
Yeah.
depicts the god Marduk battling Tiamat, a monstrous embodiment of chaos.
I see where you're going with this.
Yeah.
Marduk represents the hero who brings order from chaos. A
Exactly.
theme that echoes throughout human storytelling.
Exactly.
Oh,
Yeah.
right.
These ancient myths aren't just entertaining tales.
Right.
They're symbolic representations of the eternal struggle between order and chaos,
Hmm.
between the known and the unknown.
Right.
They reflect our deep-seated need to make sense of the world and our place in it.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So these myths, like the one with Marduk and Tiamat, it's almost like they're psychological blueprints for dealing with all the chaos and uncertainty of life.
Yeah.
And they offer us a way to kind of understand our own struggles and find meaning in the midst of it all.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it. These stories offer us a framework for understanding not just the external world, but also our internal world,
Right.
our own psychological
So
landscape.
it's not just about conquering like the external chaos, right?
Right.
There's also the internal chaos,
Yes.
those doubts and anxieties that
Like
can
Vijay.
feel just as overwhelming.
Yes, and this is where the Egyptian myth of Osiris and Horus comes in.
Okay.
It introduces this concept of death and rebirth,
Okay.
highlighting the cyclical nature of existence.
Okay.
It's not just about overcoming obstacles, but also about accepting the inevitability of change and finding ways to renew and revitalize ourselves.
So even when we create order in our lives, there's always the potential for that chaos to reemerge.
Right.
And that's not necessarily a bad thing. It's just part of the natural flow of life.
That's a really insightful observation. And Peterson connects these ancient myths to the Judeo-Christian tradition,
Okay.
seeing them laying the groundwork for many of the themes found in those narratives.
So he's saying that these stories, even if they're not literally true,
Right?
offer valuable insights into the human condition.
Yeah.
And they can help us navigate the challenges of life and
So
find a
it's-
sense of direction.
Precisely. He points to the Word of God as embodying both creation and redemption, the power to bring order from chaos and to renew what has become stagnant or corrupted.
It makes you think about the stories that we tell ourselves today.
Right.
How do those stories shape our understanding of the world?
Yeah.
And how do they influence our choices and actions?
That's a great question. And it brings us to a really challenging idea that Peterson explores through Dostoevsky's The Grand Inquisitor.
Okay.
In this story, Christ is confronted by the Grand Inquisitor,
Okay.
who argues that most people prefer security and comfort over freedom and responsibility, even if it means sacrificing truth.
Wow. So he's saying that sometimes we choose ignorance over knowledge,
Yeah.
even if it means giving up our freedom
Right.
and living a less meaningful life.
It's a provocative idea, isn't it?
Yeah. It is.
And Christ's silence in the story is even more intriguing.
Oh, okay.
It leaves us with a powerful question. What is the true nature of faith?
Right.
And how do we deal with the suffering that seems inherent to human existence?
It makes me wonder if true faith requires like confronting those difficult questions,
Right?
wrestling with doubt rather than blindly accepting easy answers.
That's a profound insight.
Yeah.
And it leads us to Peterson's analysis of good and evil.
Okay.
He argues that evil often stems from arrogance, deceit,
Okay.
and the unwillingness to confront our own limitations.
He uses historical figures like Hitler and Stalin as examples, right?
Exactly.
Leaders who caused unimaginable suffering because they believed they were above the rules,
Right.
that they had all the answers.
They represent the extreme end of the spectrum.
Hmm.
But Peterson also connects this to the concept of the adversary that exists within each of us.
Okay.
It's that part of us that's tempted to reject hope and meaning, to judge prematurely, and to succumb to despair.
So it's not just about fighting external evil. It's also about recognizing and confronting the potential for evil within ourselves.
That's a key part of Peterson's message. He reminds us that we're all capable of both good and evil,
Right.
and that true moral growth involves acknowledging our shadow side and choosing to act in accordance with our values.
This reminds me of his analysis of Solzhenitsyn's Gulag Archipelago.
Yeah.
And how people responded to the unimaginable suffering of the Soviet prison camps.
Yeah.
He highlights the story of Grigory Ivanovich Grigoriev, the soil scientist who refused to compromise his principles even when it meant risking his life.
Yeah.
It's a testament to the power of individual choice, even in the face of overwhelming evil.
That story is incredibly inspiring.
It is.
It shows that even in the darkest of circumstances, we still have the capacity to choose integrity, to act in accordance with our conscience.
So how do we cultivate that kind of integrity?
Right.
Where do we even begin?
Peterson suggests that it starts with honesty and self-knowledge.
Okay.
He reminds us that we're all flawed, that
Yeah.
we all make mistakes.
Yeah.
And that true strength comes from confronting our weaknesses, not from pretending they don't exist.
It's like he's saying that trying to be perfect is a recipe for disaster
Yeah.
because it prevents us from acknowledging and learning from our imperfections.
Exactly. He connects this to the ancient wisdom of knowing thyself.
Okay.
Peterson believes that by understanding ourselves better, we can begin to understand the world better
Right.
and to make more conscious and responsible choices.
This makes me think about his critique of ideology.
Okay.
He argues that ideology tempts us to oversimplify the world,
Right.
to divide people into good and bad,
Yeah.
and to avoid facing our own shadow side.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
He sees ideology as a sort of defense mechanism,
Okay.
a way to protect ourselves from the anxiety of uncertainty.
Okay.
But it can also lead to a kind of spiritual and intellectual stagnation.
So instead of clinging to these rigid ideologies or simplistic answers,
Right.
he's encouraging us to embrace the complexity and ambiguity of life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And to recognize that the journey towards meaning is ongoing,
Right.
that there are no easy answers or guarantees. It's about continually engaging in the process of exploration and transformation.
This reminds me of his discussion of the knowing how system
Yeah?
and how it helps us generate new behavioral strategies when old ones fail.
Right.
It's like we're constantly experimenting, trying to find what works in a world that's constantly changing.
Exactly. He argues that by repeatedly engaging in challenging activities,
Okay.
we develop competence and mastery,
Okay.
which further strengthens our ability to navigate the unknown.
So it's not just about thinking about these things,
Right.
but actually putting them into practice in the real world.
Precisely. He emphasizes the importance of action, of taking risks,
Nice.
of stepping outside our comfort zones.
Yeah.
He sees this as a crucial part of the process of self-discovery and growth.
This is where his discussion of the knowing what system comes in, right?
Yeah,
The
yeah.
system that helps us create our mental models of the world.
And he argues that stories play a crucial role in shaping these models.
Okay.
He sees stories as a way of making sense of experience,
Right.
of connecting the dots between the past, present, and future.
This makes me think about how he connects myths to the knowing what system.
Yeah.
He talks about how myths provide us with these metaphorical representations of fundamental human experiences.
That's right. He sees myths as a kind of collective wisdom,
okay.
a way of transmitting knowledge across generations about the challenges and opportunities of life.
And even though these myths are often presented in a religious context,
Right.
he argues that we can still gain valuable psychological insights from them regardless of our personal beliefs.
Exactly. He's not saying we have to believe in the literal truth of these stories,
Right.
but rather that we can use them as tools for understanding ourselves and the world around us.
This brings us back to his earlier point about the world being both a place of things and a forum for action. It's like these myths are offering us a guide to navigating the world of action, the world of values and meaning.
Precisely. They provide us with models for how to act, how to overcome challenges, how to find purpose and direction in life.
This reminds me of his analysis of the hero's journey.
Okay.
He talks about how the hero often has to leave the familiar world, venture into the unknown,
Right.
confront their fears and limitations
Yes.
in order to return transformed.
And he connects this to the process of individuation,
Okay.
the journey toward becoming a fully realized individual.
Okay.
He sees the hero's journey as a metaphorical representation of this process.
So it's not just about slaying dragons or rescuing damsels in distress.
Right.
It's about facing our own internal dragons.
Yes.
And finding a way to bring our unique gifts to the world.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And he suggests that this process of individuation is not just beneficial for the individual,
Right.
but also for society as a whole.
This makes me think about his discussion of the knowing how system and its relationship to the evolution of culture. He talks about how this system, through its constant experimentation and innovation,
Right.
drives the development of new technologies, ideas,
Yes.
and ways of being.
And he argues that this process of cultural evolution is essential for human adaptation and progress.
So it's like he's saying that our individual pursuits, our creative endeavors,
Right.
our willingness to explore and experiment
Yeah.
ultimately contribute to the larger tapestry of human experience.
Exactly. He sees a deep connection between the individual and the collective,
Right.
between personal growth and social progress.
But how do we balance the pursuit of individual interest
Right.
with the needs of society?
Yeah, how do we make sure that we're not just pursuing our own selfish desires, but actually contributing to the common good?
Yeah,
That's a question that has been pondered by philosophers for centuries.
it really has.
And Peterson doesn't offer any easy answers,
Right.
but he does suggest that pursuing our individual interests in a way that aligns with our values,
Okay.
and that takes into account the well-being of others, can be a powerful force for good.
This reminds me of his discussion of the knowing what system and its relationship to the development of moral codes.
Hmm?
He talks about how this system helps us to understand the consequences of our actions and to make choices that are in line with our values.
And he argues that stories play a crucial role in shaping these moral codes.
Like the story of Moses and the Ten
Yeah.
Commandments, which he sees as a pivotal moment in the development of abstract ethical principles.
Precisely.
Hmm.
He points to the emergence of these principles as a major step forward in human moral evolution.
But he also acknowledges the challenges of living up to these principles, right?
Yeah.
He talks about the human capacity for self-deception,
Right.
for rationalizing our bad behavior,
Yes.
for succumbing to temptation.
Yes, and that's where the concept of the adversary comes in again.
All right.
That part of us that is constantly tempting us to stray from the path.
So it's not just about knowing the right thing to do,
Right.
but also about having the courage and willpower to actually do it.
Exactly. And then this is where Peterson's emphasis on self-knowledge and personal responsibility comes in.
Okay.
He argues that we need to be able to honestly assess our own motives, to identify our weaknesses,
Right.
and to develop strategies for resisting temptation.
This reminds me of his discussion of Solzhenitsyn's experience in the Gulag.
Right.
He talks about how Solzhenitsyn came to realize that even in the most horrific circumstances,
Yeah.
people still have the capacity for choice, for good or for evil.
And he highlights the example of those who resisted the temptation to compromise their principles,
Right.
even when it meant risking their lives.
It's like he's saying that even in the darkest of times, we still have the power to choose how we respond, to hold on to our values, to act with integrity.
That's a powerful message, isn't it?
It is.
It reminds us that even when we feel powerless, we always have the power to choose how we respond to the circumstances we find ourselves in.
But how do we cultivate that kind of strength and resilience?
Right.
How do we develop the capacity to stay true to ourselves in the face of adversity?
Peterson suggests that one way is to engage in what he calls conscious suffering.
Conscious suffering.
Yeah,
That sounds a bit paradoxical.
it does.
What does he mean by that?
It means willingly confronting the things that we tend to avoid,
Okay.
the things that make us uncomfortable.
Right.
It's the things that challenge our beliefs and our sense of self.
So it's about leaning into discomfort,
Yeah.
about embracing the challenges of life,
Right.
rather than trying to escape them.
Exactly.
Almost like intentionally exposing ourselves to the things that we fear.
That's a great way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
He argues that by confronting our fears and limitations head on,
Okay.
we develop a deeper understanding of ourselves and of the world.
Right.
And we build the kind of resilience that allows us to face adversity with courage and grace.
This makes me think about his discussion of the knowing how system
Yeah.
and its relationship to the process of adaptation.
Right.
He talks about how this system is constantly generating new behavioral strategies in response to challenges. It's like our brains are wired to adapt and overcome.
And he argues that this process of adaptation is essential for survival, both on an individual and a collective level.
So by willingly engaging in the process of conscious suffering,
Yeah.
we're actually strengthening our capacity for adaptation and growth.
That's a great way to think about it.
We're essentially training ourselves to be more resilient in the face of whatever life throws at us.
He sees suffering as an inevitable part of life,
Right.
but also as a potential source of wisdom and strength.
This reminds me of his analysis of the hero's journey.
Yeah.
He talks about how the hero often has to face trials and tribulations
Right.
to endure pain and loss
Yeah.
in order to achieve their goals.
It's like suffering is a necessary part of the path to growth and transformation.
It is.
Precisely. He suggests that these challenges are not merely obstacles to be overcome,
Right.
but rather essential parts of the hero's transformation.
It's like he's saying that the hero's journey is not a path of ease and comfort, but rather a path of growth and self-discovery that inevitably involves facing difficult truths and confronting our own limitations.
Exactly. And he argues that this journey is not just for mythical heroes,
Right.
but for all of us.
Yeah.
We all have the potential to engage in this process of transformation, to face our own internal dragons, and to emerge stronger and wiser.
But how do we know which dragons to face?
Yeah, how do we choose the right path?
How do we avoid getting lost in the chaos of the unknown?
That's where Peterson's emphasis on values comes in.
He talks about the importance of aligning our actions with our values,
Yes.
of living a life that's consistent with our deepest beliefs about what's right and good.
He argues that our values provide us with a compass.
Okay.
a sense of direction,
Right.
a way to navigate the complexities of life.
This reminds me of his discussion of the knowing what system and its relationship to the development of maps of meaning.
Yeah.
He talks about how these maps guide our behavior by connecting our present state to a desired future.
Yeah. And he suggests that our values play a key role in shaping these maps and determining what we consider to be a desirable future.
So it's not just about pursuing any goal, but about pursuing goals that are in line with our values,
Exactly.
that contribute to a life of meaning and purpose.
He sees the pursuit of meaning as a fundamental human drive.
Right.
And he argues that our values provide us with a framework for making choices that are consistent with this drive.
This makes me think about his discussion of the role of the unknown in shaping our maps of meaning.
Yeah.
He talks about how encountering the unknown can trigger fear, but also hope and the possibility of revolutionary change.
And he suggests that our values can help us to navigate this tension,
Okay.
to embrace the potential for growth and transformation that the unknown offers,
Right.
while also staying grounded in what we believe to be true and good.
So it's not about avoiding the unknown,
Right.
but about approaching it with a sense of curiosity, courage,
Yeah.
and a commitment to our values.
Precisely. He sees the unknown as a source of both danger and opportunity.
Right.
And he argues that our values can help us to discern between the two.
So it seems like Peterson is saying that to truly live a meaningful life, you have to be willing to face the unknown, even if it means confronting those things that make us uncomfortable. But it can be hard to know where to start, can it? Like, how do we know which path to choose when there are so many possibilities, so many unknowns?
Well, that's where Peterson's idea of aligning our actions with our values comes in.
Okay.
He emphasizes that our values are like a compass guiding us through the wilderness of life. They provide a sense of direction and help us make choices that are consistent with our deepest beliefs about what is right and good.
So it's not just about chasing any random goal.
Right.
It's about pursuing goals that resonate with our core values. Goals that contribute to a life of meaning and purpose.
Exactly. And remember those maps of meaning we talked about earlier?
Right.
Peterson suggests that our values play a crucial role in shaping those maps, determining what we consider to be a desirable future.
It's like our values provide the framework for the map. And our experiences, especially those encounters with the unknown, kind of fill in the details.
I like that analogy.
Yeah.
It captures the dynamic interplay between our internal values and our external experiences. And speaking of the unknown, Peterson highlights a powerful quote from Alexander Solzhenitsyn.
Okay.
One man who stops lying can bring down a tyranny.
That's a striking statement. What is that?
It suggests that even small acts of courage and integrity can have a ripple effect,
Okay.
challenging oppressive systems and inspiring others to stand up for what's right.
So it connects back to the idea of the hero archetype that we talked about earlier.
Exactly.
Peterson believes that we all have the potential for heroic action,
Yeah.
for making choices that uplift ourselves and others, even in the face of seemingly insurmountable obstacles.
That's right.
But he doesn't sugarcoat the difficulty of this, does he?
No, he doesn't. He reminds us that the path of the hero is rarely easy. But there's that constant pull towards self-deception, the tendency to avoid responsibility, the fear of stepping into the unknown. It's like we all have that inner adversary whispering doubts and tempting us with shortcuts.
Right. It makes me think of those classic stories where the hero is tempted to abandon their quest,
Yeah.
to choose comfort over courage, to succumb to their fears. It's a battle we all face, isn't it?
It is.
The battle between our higher aspirations and our baser instincts.
Precisely. But as Peterson points out, it's in those moments of choice,
Right.
those moments of struggle, that our true character is forged.
It is.
And he reminds us that even in the darkest of times, there are always those who choose integrity, who choose to act in accordance with their values, who choose to make a difference.
Like Grigory Ivanovich Grigoriev,
Yes.
the soil scientist who refused to compromise his principles in the Gulag, even when it meant facing unimaginable hardship.
His story is a testament to the enduring power of the human spirit,
Right.
the ability to hold on to hope and meaning, even in the face of overwhelming darkness.
Yeah, it seems like Peterson is urging us to embrace that potential for heroism within ourselves. To take responsibility for our own lives, confront our limitations, and strive for a more meaningful existence. And it's not about achieving some kind of perfect state.
Right.
It's about continually striving, growing, and evolving.
Exactly. And remember, this journey isn't just about individual transformation.
Right.
Peterson argues that our personal choices ripple outwards, impacting the world around us.
Okay.
When we choose integrity, When we strive to live a more meaningful life, we contribute to a better world for everyone.
So if we want to create a world that is more just, more compassionate,
Yeah.
more aligned with our values,
Yeah.
it starts with each of us making those choices in our own lives.
That's right.
It's about becoming the change we wish to see in the world, as the saying goes.
That's a powerful way to put it. And that's what Peterson's maps of meaning ultimately challenges us to do,
Yeah.
to create our own maps, guided by our values, and to embark on a lifelong journey of exploration, transformation, and meaning making.
It's been quite a journey exploring these ideas with you. As we wrap up our deep dive into Peterson's maps of meaning, what's one key takeaway you hope our listeners will hold on to?
I hope listeners will walk away with a sense of empowerment. Peterson reminds us that we're not just passive passengers on the river of life. We have the power to choose our direction, to navigate the rapids, and to steer towards a destination that is meaningful and fulfilling.
Beautifully said. And to our listeners, thank you for joining us on this deep dive. We hope this exploration has sparked new insights and inspired you to continue exploring the vast landscape of your own maps of meaning. Until next time, keep seeking, keep questioning, and keep growing.